Okay, so today let's look at some interesting aspects of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. So first of all the villains are actually good people, good and ordinary people, quote unquote, who are just corrupted by some external influence, whether it be technology like the tentacles of Doc Ock, and of course the Green Goblin gas and the outfit and everything like that, the suit, and then also even Venom, Eddie Brock, not that he's a good guy or that they don't have issues, but mainly it's like it's really the villain isn't Norman Osborn or Otto Octavius or Eddie Brock. It's the external technology that both gives them the power but also corrupts them. You see like the duality of Norman psychologically. You could say it's just bringing out what's already there, but to an extent it seems like they're all good people who are just corrupted by the external influence, whether it be the technology or the suit. This is a very noteworthy thing that I said in the past that I don't think anyone's ever really pointed this out, or I've never heard this before, but it's very true that there are no henchmen. So all the villains are loner villains. So for example, the Green Goblin doesn't have henchmen. He might have them in the comics, and I know he goes on for a lot longer. Like he's a very long-standing villain in the other materials of the universe, but in the movie itself, right? He doesn't have any henchmen because again, he has his company Oscorp and everything like this, but he doesn't have like a gang or little subordinates who are going to go out and try to fight Spider-Man. So everybody that Spider-Man fights in the trilogy who isn't the major villain is just some random thug on the street or the guy who kills his uncle and stuff like that. So he's not really, it's hard to explain, but in most superhero movies aside from maybe Superman, because he's just too strong. He'll fight some thugs who try to shoot him with a gun, and it's obviously not going to do anything. And then he'll eventually face off with Luthor, and he'll have kryptonite, or he'll face off against Zod and stuff. But the reason why it makes sense there is because Superman's simply too powerful for anybody to challenge him. So it makes sense that he wouldn't have any meaningful combat encounters outside of those major ones. Here, it's kind of like, you have the other supervillains, but they're kind of standalone, so like the whole first movie, he's just fighting the Green Goblin, and that's it. Every other scene is totally unrelated to that. Same thing with Doc Ock. He doesn't have a infrastructure, a gang, or something like that, or any followers. It's literally just him and the tentacles, and that's it. And even, same thing with Venom. Like, Venom is corrupting Peter himself, but it's also just, it's a 2v1 in this case, and then Harry ends up helping, but, Eddie Brock is just some random guy, right, who is working as a photographer, and Sandman is just working by himself. So there is no like infrastructure or gang members or any other sort of plan going on. It's literally just single individual loner villains, right? And that's just very odd. When you think about most superhero movies, you'll have like the Joker has some gang members, some mafia, something else going on. So again, Superman being the notable one that doesn't. But even then, Luthor probably has followers and stuff. I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, there's absolutely none of that here. And it's not because Spider-Man is necessarily too strong. It's just because it's just how the villains are written. Again, they're sort of ordinary people who aren't even necessarily bad, and then they're corrupted by some external influence. So that's all the villain is. There is zero henchmen, and this is one thing I rebutted, that people always said, oh, Venom appears too late in the third movie. But I actually kind of disagree with that. I do have my misgivings and issues with the third movie, but I don't think he appears too late because that's just his final form. The point of the movie is it's corrupting Peter, and he's the villain in large part, right? It makes him the villain when he hits Mary Jane and when he's acting all weird, even though it's a little goofy, so it's hard to take it seriously as the villain, that maybe they shouldn't have done that, have him dance in the street and stuff. But the reality is that you say, oh, Venom appears too late, but you're not paying attention. Venom was there the whole time. Venom was, corrupting Peter. It was making him act weird. And so he was the villain for a while, and then it just switches host to Eddie, and then it's the final form. So I don't think it's really, you're sort of misinterpreting what that villain's about. It's not about some raw, physical, tangible threat the whole time. It's about a psychological threat. It's about a corrupting threat that is sort of bringing out Peter's flaws. He's getting a little cocky and arrogant, right? They love me. That was before he even got the suit, the black suit, right? He says, they love me, and he's getting the key to the city, and he's kissing Gwen Stacy. Those are all his internal flaws coming out because he feels so full of himself. That dinner with Mary Jane, like, oh, I know how you feel, even though he's talking all about himself and not realizing what Mary Jane's going through. So the point is that sort of narcissism and ego that he's starting to develop because he's so successful as Spider-Man and so loved is really coming out. So that's the point. The real villain of Venom isn't simply, oh, Eddie Brock trying to kill Peter and stuff. That's how it ends off, and that's understandable how it culminates. But the real strength of it is, oh, it's a psychological villain. It's sort of brooding. It's in the background. So to say that Venom appears too late is wrong. He's there the whole movie. It's there the whole movie, right, on Peter and corrupting him. And so the best movie in the trilogy is obviously the second one. The best villain, arguably. Although, again, I sort of have some misgivings about all these villains being sort of sympathetic. There's no, like, true villain. I guess Norman only pretends to be good at the end, right? When he impales himself, he's trying to appeal to Peter. It's hard to know whether that moment is him just pretending or the real Norman actually coming out. But all three of them are sort of sympathetic. You see that with Octavius at the end, like, oh, he snaps out of it when his tentacles sort of short circuit. So in the end, oh, it's not really him. He's not really the bad guy. It's actually the tentacles. Like, it's weird to look at it that way. That makes it a little bit unsatisfying because, again, the real villain isn't the character, right? It's actually, oh, this external apparatus technology. So the real bad guy is just the tentacles on his back. Like, is that really the most satisfying thing to see? The worst one is part 3, and I think the misframing with it is sometimes people say, oh, they're not realizing that, like, it's so bad it's good. That's why people like the dancing and the memes and stuff. When something is memed, it's typically because it's not good, right? Like The Room has a lot of memes, or at least when it's memed that much. Where memeing is the exception, or is the norm, not the exception. Like, where every scene is a meme, maybe that means there's something wrong with it. Like the Star Wars prequels. You're not memeing it because it's good, you're memeing it because it's bad. Like, some of the dialogue is so clunky. I don't like sand and stuff like that. And one thing about this Peter that maybe is notable, because Peter is often considered to be very smart. You don't really see a whole lot of that. Maybe I'm wrong a little bit, because you see, like, with Dr. Connor respecting him and having some high praise of him, or even Octavius talking to Octavius. They sort of start off like that in the movies, like, I'm something of a scientist myself. Like when Peter is saying that he studied Norman's work, and obviously he's dealing with Octavius for some research project, right? They start off like that, but then throughout the course of the movie, Peter doesn't seem very smart, even as Spider-Man or whatever. He's not dumb, but he's sort of just ordinary. He's not like a genius the way I think he's portrayed in a lot of the other works. Again, I'm not an expert on the universe, but I think that's one element that's missing. They sort of introduce it like, oh, look, he's really smart in school. That's why he's able to meet with Norman in a, intellectual sense, and he's able to discuss with Otto and stuff. And even talk to Dr. Connors. Those are like, each movie has an interaction like that, where it seems like, oh, I'm something of a scientist myself, respecting the fact that Peter is very smart, right, at the beginning of the first one, and then obviously Octavius he's dealing with, and then in the third movie he's dealing with the Dr. Connors trying to investigate the Venom symbiote. And so, but then see, he's kind of dumb for not realizing that he's wearing it, but it feels so good, he just ignores it. And then the one thing that I think is just a straight up mistake is the web shooter aspect, where it's always, they even kind of reference this in the newer movies, right? When they have the multiverse, No Way Home and stuff, where, oh, the other ones have to actually manually have a web shooter, whereas he just does it himself. I don't think that's something they thought about at the time. They might try to explain it now, like, oh, that's just how he is. He can just shoot them just like that. But it was something I think they actually forgot about or missed, or just didn't think would be cool enough to sell it, right, in the film, in the first trilogy. So they kind of just forgot about it or ignored it. The fact that, oh, he still has to have a manual web shooter and he can't just do it on his own, right? I genuinely think that's just a mistake that they made. A couple final points to note is I like the intro sequence in Spider-Man 3 where it goes through the titles and it kind of is showing you a flashback of all the events that have happened in the first two movies, which is good just for the audience's sake, of course. But as an actual in-universe explanation, you could say it's when the symbiote is taking over Peter's suit and his body and his powers, right? And it's able to sort of process through all of his memories. This is kind of a good theory that I like. So in other words, it's not just you as an audience seeing that, it's actually the suit, because that's the visual of what it's showing too. Kind of the suit and its machinations, and so it's actually processing through and absorbing all his memories also while it's absorbing his powers. And one final point is that Sandman is kind of a shitty villain, that he's just sort of introduced as a retcon BS character where you see who kills Uncle Ben in the first movie, and they make a whole big thing about that, and Spider-Man even gets him killed kind of inadvertently. He trips out the window, but that was supposed to be the big encounter. So all of a sudden they retcon that, oh no, it was actually Marco, this other guy that we don't even see in the first movie, and now he also is Sandman, just to try to make some other big character relationship villain, right, that they have some personal stake in it. And so that's kind of stupid, and they don't set the rules as far as how he can be defeated very clearly. He's completely washed away in the water, but then he still comes back. And then he's also seems to be defeated at the end by Harry just shooting some bombs. There's actually kind of a troll moment there too. But no, his motivations aren't very strong. He's doing it for his daughter, but like, he's a character we almost don't even care about. He's just there just for the sake of being an extra villain, and just to show off the power, but his actual character is very dull, boring. He's not really threatening. He's not really that sympathetic. He's just kind of bland. So I thought he was really shitty. I don't even mind the fact that Venom appears late, as people say, because like I said, to me, he doesn't appear late. People just misunderstand what it's really about. And part of that is aided by the goofiness of how they portray it. But the reality is, oh, it's corrupting Peter, and it's the presence of the villain is still there, just in a different psychological kind of form. It's not simply a physical villain. It's a mental, psychological, emotional villain that you have to deal with right from within, that is actually corrupting Peter himself. So even though, again, the way it corrupts him doesn't make it seem that menacing, its presence is felt the whole movie, and that's really what it's about, right? If you were to ask, like, what is the theme of the movie, it's not simply, oh, we got to beat up the bad guy. It's about we got to deal with our own inner demons and narcissism, and we see that even at the beginning where he's getting full of himself at the key to the city party and stuff like that. But no, Sandman, there's even a troll moment that seems like unfinished at the end of the movie where Harry flies around a water tower, right, and then shoots Sandman with a couple bombs, and then he just falls down. So in other words, they don't use the water tower, but they're kind of in the back of the audience's mind. We would think, oh, he's going to use that to finally finish him off, like he's going to blow up the water tower and do something with that. But then they just, either they forgot to put that in or they just left it out, or why would they show the water tower when we know his weakness is water, and then he just flies around it as if to troll the audience, like, oh, that would have been a cool way to explain how we defeat him, even though it didn't work before. It could have been some more thorough way of using it. But no, we were just going to fly around it, and we forgot to put that part in, or we edited it out and didn't finish it. And then we're just going to have him shoot a couple bombs that we've seen him shoot 100 times. And all of a sudden, oh, that just causes him to melt away. Like, how?